Should I open it? Yeah.
No.
No.
The Church of Scientology in St. Louis is an organization that everyone kind of seems to have a vague knowledge of, but no concrete ideas. Some think the church believes in aliens, others think it's a cult, but some just think it's a regular church. My goal for this documentary is to distinguish whether or not the Church Scientology in St. Louis is a religion or a cult. But before we get to this debate, we should first cover the history of the church. The entire religion started with a single book, Dianetics. This book was written by L. Ron Hubbard in June of 1950, and to summarize it, it's a type of science that focuses on the mind, kind of like psychology, but instead it comes to a different conclusion about the inner workings of the brain, which tend to be a lot more straightforward than psychology. The book's main claim is that Dianetics contains the invariable cure to all mental illness and painful memories. And any layman has the ability to cure these diseases with enough practice. The way to cure mental illness, and according to Dianetics, and get rid of painful memories, is to go through an auditing session. These auditing sessions are like therapeutic sessions. There is the patient and the auditor, or as known today for the modern example, a therapist. The main difference lies in the inclusion of a tool called the E-meter. It's a tool that can pinpoint areas of pain, helping the auditor find where these painful memories are stored. Once a person has gone through this process, has gotten rid of all painful memories of mental illness, they transcend to a state of mind called clear. A clear person is considered to be above average human and has these qualities. Now, a little bit about the history of Dianetics and Scientology in St. Louis. The book Dianetics first appeared on St. Louis's radar as a part of a best-selling books list in June of 1950 in the Post-Dispatch. Soon, advertisements about a Dianetics group popped up in the paper around October of 1950, and only 3 months later, the Dianetics Society of St. Louis was founded and had their first official meeting in the Chase Hotel. But 2 years later, L. Ron Hubbard was charged with practicing medicine without a license. So to prevent his organization from going bankrupt, he created the religion known as Scientology, which used Dianetics as a foundation for its beliefs, but also added some beliefs about the soul, which they called the Thetan, pushing their beliefs into a more spiritual and religious direction. Because of this new classification as a religion, L. Ron Hubbard strongly encouraged the previously autonomous Dianetics groups, like the one in St. Louis, to change to a Scientologist organization, or a Church of Scientology, and have him as their leader. This important shift caused the Dianetics Society in St. Louis to change its name to the Church of Scientology in 1955. And for the next about 30 or so years, the Church of Scientology jumped around from different locations. They had a few locations on Lindell, but then they settled into the location that they're known today, and it's on Delmar Boulevard, 6900. And you know you're looking at the building correctly. It has a big Scientology logo branded across the front. And usually there's a little sign out the front that says free personality test. Now, before we get into the bad of the Church of Scientology, let's first look over the good things that they've done. The great stuff that, honestly, it warms my heart. So first off, they have a volunteer ministry. Now, their volunteer ministry, it's been around for quite a bit. And they have a Facebook page, Twitter, everything. And the volunteer ministry really, they try nailing home the idea that drugs, they're just terrible things. And I'm pretty sure in October of 2018, they dedicated the entire month to drug prevention and drug awareness. They set up tents in the city, and they handed out pamphlets about info about the dangerousness of drugs and where to get help just in case you've fallen into one of these sick traps that drugs create. Not only do they help prevent drug abuse, they also help their community a lot. They cleaned up the streets of the local parish to get rid of all the nasty throwing away beer bottles, trash bags, all that gross stuff. And also they help the homeless. They provide food to the homeless, and they're doing great things. After focusing on the good parts of the church, now we're focused on the bad.
So first off, how does the church go about getting its members? The main way the church acquires new members is through auditing sessions. People are initially attracted to these sessions because they promise to relieve mental pain and even they promise to get rid of mental disorders, mental illness. The main problem with this method is that no part of the auditing sessions actually work. It's just pseudoscience. The e-meter that I previously discussed is just a glorified kid's lie detector toy, which it's been proven to be inaccurate in multiple scientific studies. It just goes off of human agitation. It doesn't actually tell if you're lying. I even got the chance to test this e-meter at the church itself, and my results were pretty much the same. It felt like a cheap plastic toy, and actually when I flipped it over, it said, just a little label, religious artifacts. They are forced to do this by the government because they don't work. So the component of the auditing session that's meant to find your troubling areas doesn't work. But maybe look on the bright side. Maybe, the real power of the auditing session is in the auditor or the person who talks to you during the session. The problem with the auditor is they're said to be able to get rid of all mental illness, but there's a complete, utter lack of tests surrounding the method they use. The book that teaches the method of auditing claims numerous times that it's run scientific tests about auditing, and they all came to the conclusion that auditing works. But I've dug for hours for this, and I still haven't found a single test that they've mentioned. I haven't found any scientific studies that represent the findings. I even looked at the citations. The only part of auditing that actually seemed to work is the relieving of mental pain. This is done by having the patient recount traumatizing experiences to the auditor until the experiences have no more power over you. But this is a basic method of therapy. You can do this with anybody who's just willing to sit down and listen to you talk about your experiences. You don't need a special certified auditor to do this process. So the main claim of auditing about mental illness and how auditing can cure mental illness is a lie. This is the single lie that allows the church to get so many members. Since mental disorders or mental illnesses, so when people get desperate to rid themselves of these issues, it's much easier to overlook the facts and just see the phrase, "this will cure mental illness," and go through an auditing session just because it seems such like an easy way to get rid of it. And when you're desperate, you can overlook red flags. The church also makes it very easy to get your first auditing session. When I went there with some friends, they offered me a coupon that would get me one free auditing session. And once these, back to the desperate people example, once these desperate people go through auditing sessions, they'll feel momentarily better because the method the auditors use is meant to relieve trauma. But relieving trauma doesn't actually cure your mental illness. It just makes you feel better for a little bit. And you're going to want to chase that high you got from the first one. And so when you come back, they're going to start charging you. And these auditing sessions aren't cheap. They start at average about $100 an hour. And based on accounts of other Scientologists, other members of the church are going to pressure you to keep going to these therapy sessions. And so to recap, the church advertises auditing sessions that are fraudulent to get money. Well, how much money do they actually get from all this? Well, the last recorded time the church talks about its income was all the way back in 1974. They've been a lot more private about their earnings and their member count, but back in 74, they claimed they made about $20,000 a week. And accounting for inflation, that would be about $5.7 million a year. And remember, because of the tax exemption status, they get all of that money. And in comparison to the average St. Louis Catholic Church, the Catholic churches only make about $200,000 a year. And for a religious organization, that's quite a bit of money. With this money, the church could have the ability to constantly fund lawsuits against anybody who criticizes them. And they did. When the St. Louis Post-Dispatch put out a series of articles both criticizing and praising the philosophy and beliefs of the church swung back with a $2.5 million lawsuit. But the case was dismissed, since the newspaper never criticized any individual person. The religion Scientology did try appealing it, but it didn't work. But churches all over the country have also tried filing lawsuits against people who have criticized them, and other people have actually backed down since they don't have to fight lawsuits, because lawsuits are expensive things to fight. Another thing the churches have been known to do, not the St. Louis one specifically, but other ones across America, is to hire private investigators to follow ex-members and just harass them. In conclusion, while the church may have the title of a religion, it doesn't deserve it. A religion is something you're meant to grow faithful towards through your own free will. But the church, instead, tries to hook people into their religion with pretty lies and pressures them to stay once they become part of the community. Furthermore, the church abuses its tax-exempt funds to silence critics and harass those who leave. And this church has adopted the idea that faith is money. Religions don't actively take away from their followers. But in abusing followers is the behavior of a cult, which is what the Church of Scientology is.